Welcome to Second Take, the show that focuses on the issues behind the news. This week we take a look at the state of play of South Africa's state-owned enterprises with Engineering News editor Terence Creamer. Terence, welcome to Second Take. There is much anxiety over the goings-on at some of South Africa's largest state-owned enterprises, from financial issues at Eskom to leadership ructions at Transnet. Are the state-owned enterprises in crisis?
I think if you went onto the street and asked people, are state-owned enterprises in crisis, I think you'd get a strong yes. And also people saying that they're not only in crisis, but they are a drain on society. The reality, I think, is slightly more complicated. For instance, at Eskom, which just reported its worst loss ever in history, they have deep financial problems. But if you look at where those come from, it comes from a real big policy failure at government level, which disallowed them from building and going ahead. An inertia at the regulator where our prices were left far too low for far too long, which meant the private sector was not really willing to come in. And then we had the real problems of the board and management, the board not taking the issue to government early enough, and management not managing the coal stocks in a way that allowed the system to carry on when the rains came early last year. Then at Transnet we have this very unhealthy and unsavoury leadership tussle, which is centred around Transnet Freight Rail CEO Siyabonga Gama, who's seen by many of his high-level supporters as being persecuted. And so while maybe they're not fully in crisis, and we must admit that the state-owned enterprises are repositories of good skills, they're big enterprises, these are complex businesses, and they're reigniting their training programs, there are definitely makings of a crisis.
Now, earlier this week we saw Cabinet ask Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan and Public Enterprises Minister Barbara Hogan to compile a report on the state of the state-owned enterprises. What do you think this signals?
Yeah, I think this is an important signal that Cabinet has noticed this perception that there is a crisis at state-owned enterprises. There's unhappiness. I mean, even within Cabinet around the Siyabonga Gama issue, we've had Cabinet ministers speaking probably out of turn. I think President Zuma made that point, that they spoke on the issue where he felt they shouldn't have. But there's an unhappiness with the state of state-owned enterprises, from Eskom through to Transnet, but SABC and the whole gamut. There's not a strong feeling of confidence about it. There's also a feeling that maybe these enterprises aren't delivering on their developmental mandates. So they might be, in some cases, financially sound, in other cases not, and wanting bailouts, but they're not delivering that developmental mandate. And they're wanting to reignite the discussion around state-owned enterprises, the governance of these enterprises. And I think there's sort of two camps around that emerging, with some saying, let's reintegrate these almost into the line departments. And others are saying, no, the best practice is to have independent boards to ensure these businesses run sustainably.
How do you think the current high-profile leadership spat at Transnet is likely to shape the future direction of governance at state-owned enterprises?
Well, I think this is the big issue. I think, as I said, some people would like to see these falling more under the line departments. Others feel that the boards are important. And I think there is going to be a discussion around this. We're going to first have this report from Minister Hogan and Minister Gordhan about what is happening financially, what is going on with their turnaround strategies, etc. And that's going to be important to watch. But I think there's a bigger debate happening, and I think that was raised in a recent South African Communist Party document, an internal document, which said, you know, boards are a problem. They are hiding behind their fiduciary duties so as to not deliver on the developmental mandate. So there's a big philosophical debate around the role of state-owned enterprises, but also the governance of those state-owned enterprises. And you can see it starkly in the way it's being handled around the Siyabonga Gama matter. You have the high-profile supporters saying this is a witch hunt and we must just be allowed to appoint the best person who we can trust to the job. On the other hand, you've got the board saying, look, we've gone through a whole process here, selection process. That selection process, yes, Gama's name did come up. He was never on either of the shortlists. I mean, in fact, Pravin Gordhan was the first name to be forwarded to Cabinet, but then he became Finance Minister. The second list had a different set of names, and his name was not on it. So there is no impediment to appointing a CEO from those lists, and this is our board recommendation. Now, EDF in France is going through a similar thing this weekend, where the boards will meet and make their recommendation. It'll be interesting to see. I mean, there's a lot of discussion about how this person that they are selecting is close to the president, etc. So there's always a political undercurrent to state-owned enterprise appointments. But I think the philosophy around boards, are we going to have the best and the brightest being attracted to state-owned enterprise boards, which we must say we have got at the moment. We've got Bobby Godsall at Eskom, and we've had very strong board people at SAA, even the SAA that's in crisis. They've got strong board members, as well as at Transnet. And if that independence is totally eroded and they feel there's going to be all these layers of oversight, so you'll have the oversight of Parliament, which is good. You need that transparency. In fact, I think there should be more talking to Parliament and more oversight going on there. You're going to have the oversight of this interministerial committee that's going to be re-established, which is an executive branch. Plus you have the board oversight. And all of these can be competing. So it's a big discussion. It's one that Parliament wants to take to a conference level next year. But I think we're going to see a lot happening in the intervening period around this.
Thank you very much. That's the Second Take show for today. Thank you for watching, and join us again next week for more news analysis.